Hello, welcome to the supplemental tutorial for the 2022 USITT Conference Workshop, Digital Pattern Drafting in CLO 3D. In this tutorial, I will give you an introduction to the tools, interface, and capabilities of CLO 3D while drafting a period Mensfest pattern from an extant diagram. Let's begin. We will begin by downloading the free trial for CLO 3D on the website with the link in the description. You will need to create an account and then download the program and install it on your computer. Once you've done that, you will also need to download the pattern that we will be working from today, which is also available in the link in the description. Now I'm going to give you an overview of the interface of CLO 3D. We're going to go ahead and start with the File menu at the very top here. And to get you started, I'm going to have you update a few of your settings. So we're going to go to Settings, User Settings. And when this window pops up, we're going to go to User Interface. And we want to check that our unit system is inches. So we're just clicking that drop-down menu and clicking inches. All right, we're also going to go to View Controls, and we're going to use the Maya preset. Closing out of there. Next, I'm going to go back up to the File menu, go to Preferences, Gizmo, World Coordinate. Great. The next window I want to show you is the library, which is on the left side of your screen. If you can't see it, it's because you need to click this little icon here that says library. Once you've clicked it, the little side screen will pop open and it'll give you a few options. I'm going to go to Avatar, and then down here, your screen, it might look like this or it might look like this. Either way, we're going to go to Mail V2. And you're going to see a lot of little icons or names of the different avatars that we can use. For this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and click NV2 Thomas. So we double click that, and it may need to download really quickly. Just go ahead and give it time to do that. All right, and then we see Thomas showing up in what we call our 3D window. And we're going to go ahead and practice navigating around the 3D window really quick. In order to do this, you're going to hold down either the Option key on the Mac or the Alt key on the PC. And while you're holding it down, you're going to click the screen and move your mouse. So right now my Alt key is being pressed down, my left mouse button is held down, and I'm just moving my mouse around the screen. And that is how we rotate in the 3D window. If we want to pan in the 3D window, which is just going from left to right, we're going to hold down Option on the Mac or Alt on the PC. We're going to click the middle mouse button. This might be your scroll wheel. And that's how we moved from left to right, up, down in one plane. In order to zoom, we're going to keep that Option Alt key held down, and we're going to use the right mouse button to zoom. Another option for zoom is just to use your scroll wheel. All right, and that is how we navigate the 3D window. All right, let's look at this window right here, which is the 2D pattern window. This is where you're going to do all of the flat pattern drafting for your garments, whereas the 3D window is where you will see the actual simulation of what they will look like in 3D. So while we're here, we're going to go ahead and get our pattern diagram ready to go. So let's right-click anywhere in the 2D pattern window and click Format 2D Background. When you click there, this little window will pop up, and we want to click on this tiny little folder icon. And now you get to try and figure out where you saved your pattern. Mine is right there. And it'll just go ahead and pop up in the background. Now I've already worked through this pattern, and so I know that I need to change the scale to 35%, and that should be the same on yours as well. We can leave the opacity at 50, or if it's hard for you to see, you can turn that up to 100 as well. And then we're going to go ahead and click Okay. In the 2D window, we have basically a 2D, like a flat representation of our avatar. And then now we have our pattern. And how we navigate the 2D window is very similar to navigating the 3D window, where you hold down Alt or Option, and then hold down the middle mouse button to pan, just like we do in the 3D window. And you can you can right click while holding Alt or Option to zoom, or you can also use your scroll wheel. So it's exactly the same. Uh, it's the exact same way to navigate. The only thing that you don't have in the 2D window is the rotate option, because there's really nothing to rotate. The next window we're going to explore is the object browser, which is right over here. This is where you can see our fabric is here. And when we click on our fabric, you'll notice that options pop up in our property editor. So we have our object browser, which you can select your buttons, your buttonholes, top stitching, and other various customizations for your garment. Primarily, we're going to be working with just the fabric and the buttons today. And anytime you click on anything in here, or really anywhere in your workspace, if there are options for adjusting, that's going to show up in your property editor. So that is your object browser and property editor. All right, that's a little overview of the interface. Let's go ahead and get started in tracing our pattern. So pattern drafting in Clo3D, it can take the place of many different forms. In some ways, it's actually a combination of flat patterning and draping, as you can work with the flat pattern simultaneously with working with it on the form. This is a method that I've used for several different projects, starting with a base pattern and then working off of that starting point to kind of drape it on the form the rest of the way. I've also done very traditional flat patterning methods in my 2D window, but this is a way that I find that I can very quickly and easily accomplish a period silhouette, especially when I have an extant diagram to work off of. All right, the first tool that we're going to use is the polygon tool. Now, while I'm going through all of these tools, I'm going to tell you the name, and I'm also going to tell you the hotkey on the keyboard that you need to press to pull up that tool. The more that you get used to using hotkeys, the faster your workflow will become. So the first tool is when you press the H key on the keyboard, you will see this little icon turn blue. This is the polygon tool. You can also just get to this tool by clicking this icon here. So the polygon tool is what we're going to use to lay out the base of our pattern. I'm going to use my scroll to scroll in so I can see a little bit better. And I'm going to go ahead and start clicking with the left mouse button every little corner or of my pattern. So notice that I'm in the arm sign now. I'm not clicking anywhere in this curve. I'm just clicking at this point down here because that's where there's going to be an angle. I could click right here at the waist, but I'm going to go ahead and skip that one since it's just a curve. I'm going to click down here. And then I'm going to jump straight over here, ignoring that curve. From here, I'm going to click the base of my lapel. And because this is a grown-on lapel, I'm going to go ahead and jump over here, click down here. I'm ignoring this section here because I know that that's the separate collar piece. And I'm going to finish my polygon by clicking on the same point that I started. When I do that, the computer knows that I have completed my shape and it'll fill it in white. Now this is actually really hard to work with because now I can't see my pattern anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in the 2D pattern window. There's several icons up here, and this is just different things that you can show or hide in your 3D pattern window. I'm going to hover over the one that looks like a little roll of fabric, and I can choose different options for what my pattern will look like. I'm going to click on translucent surface so that I can still see my pattern very clearly, but my pattern that I've just drawn, my polygon, but I can still see my reference image behind it, and I find that a very much easier way to work. All right, so if for some reason you added several points that you don't want, or you maybe didn't add enough points and you're regretting your choices, you can use the Edit Pattern tool, which is the Z hotkey. So if you press Z, you'll notice that this tool is highlighted. This is the Edit Pattern tool. You can also just go up to the toolbar and click that at any point in time. When you have this tool selected, you can move any of the points in your polygon. So if I just was very sloppy and I didn't really, I think that this point needs to be more like right here. I can move it there, move that point there. That's how I can do that. If you click on a point and you press backspace, it'll delete it. You can also right click a point and you can click delete if that's easier for you. If you want to add more points, click the line, go ahead and right click and split. And you can split in a few different ways, but we're going to move that point anyway, so just clicking split we'll just add another point that we'll just go ahead and then click and move around. All right, so that's the Z tool, or the Edit Pattern tool. Now we want to go ahead and put these curves in here, or else this will be a really ugly vest with no arm's eye. So to make a straight line curved, we're going to use the Curve tool, and the hotkey for that is C. So I'm clicking C. And it actually, the same little icon that used to be the Edit Pattern tool just turned into a Curve tool. And if you're confused about how to find the Edit Pattern tool, you actually have to hover over, click, left click on this icon, and then you can see there's actually quite a few options here that will show up in the same kind of icon space. But you can also just use the C hotkey, so go ahead and C. And once you have that tool, select the Edit Curve tool. You can grab any line and move it around until you get your curves to match what you like. So that's all I'm doing right now is I'm just left clicking my line, dragging it, letting it go. Left click, drag, let it go. And I'll do that down here too. If you're getting frustrated because you can't find the right curve that you want, or for whatever reason, all you need to do, especially right here where the curve actually changes directions, what you need to do is go back to the Edit Pattern tool, or with the Z hotkey, and you'll notice that these blue handles show up. Those are called the Bezier handles, and you can left click those handles and drag and move them around, and that will give you more control over your curve. This is not super intuitive, but once you get used to it, you find that you can have a lot more control. But it'll take some time, so don't feel bad if it's if it's difficult right now. Just do your best. All right, so that is our first pattern. That's the front of our vest. Now we're going to go ahead and repeat the same steps with the back of the vest. So I'm going back to my first hotkey, which was the polygon tool, H for polygon, and there's my icon. Clicking all the points in the back, boop, boop, and we'll put one here. Again, skipping over my curves, and right here, and then ending by clicking on the same point I started with. And the same thing, if you need to move any of your points, then go ahead and use the Edit Pattern tool, which is Z. If not, if you're happy where they're all at, go ahead and press C and you go ahead and adjust your curves. And again, we're going to have to just give the curve in here, and it's okay if it's not good. We have to give a curve to this line in order for the Bezier handles to show up when we go back to Edit Pattern. If we don't give it a curve at all, the Bezier handles won't appear. And we're going to go ahead and adjust those to look how we want them to. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Now that we have traced the outlines of our patterns, both the front and the back, we're going to go ahead and get them sewn together and put on our avatar. So to do this, we're going to use a new tool, which is the A tool. I just call all of these the names that of their hotkeys, but the A tool is transform pattern. And that's just basically a big hand so that you can move your pattern around your space. I don't recommend moving it too far away from your uh, from your reference because it's always handy to have it kind of laid right on top. But with that tool selected, I'm going to go ahead and I'll left click my front to select it. So it's selected because it's turned yellow all the way around. And I'm going to use a hotkey to duplicate it. And that hotkey is either Command or Control and D. And this outline of the symmetrical pattern is going to show up, and all I have to do is click anywhere in the 2D window and it becomes its own pattern. And you'll notice as I've been working, these patterns, once they're fully formed over here, they show up in the 3D workspace as well. We're going to get those into position in just a little bit. First, we're going to go ahead and do the same with the back. We're going to go Control or Command D and click anywhere in the 2D window. And now we have both the left and right side of the fronts and the backs. So I'm going to go ahead and let you all try simulating for the first time and see what happens. In the 3D window, and really no matter where your mouse is at, this will work. You're going to go ahead and press the space button and see what happens. The space button is simulate, so this little arrow will turn blue, and that means that the computer is, or the program is calculating gravity and the folds and the dynamics of all the fabric. And since they were just floating in space, they all just kind of crumpled in the floor as if you had held up your fabric and then let go. So that's pretty funny, but not very useful. So we're going to go ahead and end simulation by pressing space again. You also can press this arrow up at the top to end simulation. So the spacebar both starts and ends simulation. And we're just going to use Control Z to get those back into, Control or Command Z to undo to get those back into position. If they're really messed up, you can always select all by doing Control or Command A, right-clicking and saying Reset 3D Arrangement, and they'll go back into space. So we want to get these laid nicely over our avatar so that when we simulate, they don't just fall to the floor. We also need to sew them together. What we're going to do to make this easy is use the command Shift F to show arrangement points. And that option is also over here with our little avatar display section. You can go hover over it and then click show arrangement points, and then it says, oh, Shift F, that's your hotkey. Great. So from this point, we want to make sure we're still in the transform pattern tool, so A, and we're going to click on a pattern and hover over an arrangement point. And then once you kind of see that somewhere that might be helpful, you can click on that button, on that blue button, and it'll place it like on your avatar. And I think that's a good place for it because, well, actually, we could go a little lower. How about that? That's a good place for him. The key is to kind of get the shoulder seams above the shoulders so that when we simulate and it's sewn together, it will fall gracefully onto his shoulders. All right, and we're going to go ahead and click the back pattern as well and place that there. And even though there's some overlap, I'm not worried about it. Once I simulate and it's sewn, it'll fix itself. All right, let's do some sewing now. The hotkey for the segment sewing tool is N. So when I press N, you'll notice that both in the 3D window, this icon turns blue, and in the 2D window. You can sew in both the 3D and the 2D window. And to sew, we're going to go ahead and I'll show you in the 2D window first. We'll click the first seam that we want to be sewn, and then it'll stay kind of highlighted blue, and then we'll click the second seam that we want to be sewn. And once we've done that, it'll show some lines. You can see in the 3D window, there's stitching lines that kind of appeared here, and then these turned colors in the 2D pattern window. And what's really cool is because when we duplicated the pattern, we technically duplicated with symmetric sewing. It's going to sew both our side seams at the same time, and it'll do that as long as you're clicking corresponding parts on your patterns. We'll sew the back together, and something I want to point out is if I click this back seam here, you can see this little notch is there, and then I will go ahead and click this one down here with the notch at the bottom. The sewing gets twisted, and it will do exactly what it looks like it's going to do. When you simulate it, it's going to sew the top to the bottom here and the bottom to the top there. We've all accidentally sewed things upside down in this way, but thankfully in Clo 3D there's a really easy way to fix it. We're going to go to the B tool, which is this edit sewing tool. I'm going to go ahead and right click my sewing and then click reverse sewing, and then it just fixes it. So that's really nice. All right, going back to my end tool, I'm going to sew my shoulder seams together, and I'm going to go ahead and do this in the 3D window because I think it's easier to see a little bit, making sure things don't get twisted. And again, I was paying attention to my notches being on the same corresponding side and not getting twisted, and I can see those are very straight, and I think that's going to work really well. So from here, let's go ahead and see what happens if we simulate again. So I'm going to go ahead and press the space key. And there you go. His vest looks beautiful. You can see that there's some collision here where it wanted to sew through his arm. That's a super easy fix. All we have to do is press the A key for the transform pattern, and if I click with my left mouse button, I can actually drag this out of his arm. So there is a little bit of this kind of finessing. I can also kind of arrange, I think, this vest. Let's see, this actually should be in the bottom. I'm going to pull this one out on top so that when I put my buttons in, the overlap is nice and ready to go. And this takes some getting used to. For sure, because it's like you have to navigate. I'm both moving around my window to get a good position, and I'm using my buttons. So I find it often it's easier if I'm pulling out this way to have my camera pointed this way, like to his side, so that I can get a good angle there. I think that's going to be enough to help when I go to do my buttons, that's going to work. So we're going to leave it there, and I'm going to go ahead and end simulation. It's always a good idea to end your simulation while you're working on your 2D pattern because it will help your computer from bogging down. All right, we have one last pattern piece to trace, and that is our collar. So we're going to go ahead and just repeat the same steps that we used to make these two patterns. We're going to start with our polygon tool, our H key, hotkey will get us there. And I'm going to trace this solid line for my collar. And I can start here. Like here, I need 4 points to make this collar happen. And then right here, and there. And then I'm going to use my Z tool or my edit pattern tool if I need to move any of these points around. I don't think I do, so I'm going to go ahead and go to my C tool or my curve editor. And I'll just adjust that curve there, and I'll adjust that curve there. That looks pretty good. Now something that I'm going to need for this collar to be successful is the roll line, and you'll notice that this dotted line here is indicating where this lapel is going to roll out, and then it continues on to the collar as well. So I'll go ahead and do it on the collar first. There's going to be a little bit of overlap of these two patterns, so to avoid it from being confused, I'm going to put the roll line in the collar first, move the collar, and then I'll do the roll line on the on the vest. So to do the roll line, I'm just going to make an internal line, which is a new tool that we'll use, the G tool, or the internal polygon or line tool. And so the hotkey is G. And for this tool, all I'm going to do is click on the pattern where I want my line to begin. So I'll go to click there because I'm following this dotted line. And then I will double click where I want it to end. And that's my new internal line. I'm just going to make sure that that went on the right piece that I wanted it to. Yes, it did. So I'll move my collar out of the way, and I'm going to do the same thing on my vest front. So I'm going to go back to the G tool. By the way, I used the transform pattern tool, the A tool, to move my pattern. All right, going back to G, clicking on here for that roll line and ending at this point that I conveniently gave myself. And again, just click once to start and double click to end. Now you'll see that these lines appeared on the 3D window, but they're actually not doing anything. They're just guidelines at this point. In order to turn them into fold lines, we need to go to the Edit Pattern tool, or the Z hotkey, click our line, and over here in the Property Editor, you will see there's a fold strength option. We can leave that at 5, and a fold angle option. What we want to do is change the fold angle to 360 degrees for a sharp angle. 360. And click enter. And then we're going to do the same thing on the line on the collar. You can also just adjust this slider by clicking and dragging to 360. And when it simulates, I'll show you what happens. Before we do that, though, we need to sew this collar. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use the A tool, the transform pattern tool, click my collar, and do Control or Command D, and then click anywhere in the 3D window. Now this one's a little bit different because we're not just sewing this line to this line, we're actually sewing this line and this line to this line because the collar wraps around the rest of the front and then travels onto the back. So we need to connect two lines to one line with our sewing. And how we're going to do that is we're actually going to use the M sewing tool, and that's right over here, free sewing. So I use the M hotkey to get there. And I'm going to go ahead and click on my front pattern first. And I'm going to start here because that's where I want my collar to stitch to. And then I'm going to just run this along and end at this point because that's where I want it to end. And now I'm going to follow the same direction on my collar. I'm going to start here and end, and do you see where it shows me a dark blue point? That's showing me that these two seams are true to each other. They're both 5.646 inches long, and so those will fit together nicely. And I'm just going to go ahead and click to end that. And now it just sewed this edge to this edge. And from this point, I can do the same on the collar, or on the back, starting at the shoulder seam, working my way down, and then going back to my collar, starting where my last seam ended, and I'm going to keep going. And you can see there's going to be a little ease there. We should fix that when we true it. And then click again. And now the collar is sewn to both the front and the back pattern. Now we could press simulate right now, and that pattern's just going to fly and try to position into place. But there's actually an easier way to do that. If we go to the transform pattern tool, or the A hotkey, and we'll click on the pattern, the collar pattern, right click and superimpose side. When we do that, it's going to look at where it's being sewn to, and I've just asked it to go there. I'm going to do the same with the other side, superimpose side. And now when I simulate, it has a little bit of collision with the neck, and we're just going to pull it out. But it's right in position, which is a good place for it to be. All right. Oh, I should probably sew that center back of the collar together. So I'm going to go to my segment sewing tool, or my N hotkey, and I'm just going to click that side and that side. All right, you're sewn together. it's not really listening to my folds lines very well. And this is because, I don't know, it just doesn't have a lot of integrity. And so one thing I'm going to do really quick while we're here is I'm going to stop my simulation. I'm going to go to my transform pattern tool, or the A hotkey. I'm going to click on my front patterns, and I'm going to go to solidify, no, sorry, strengthen, which is Control H. So I'll go ahead and just click the patterns and do Control or Command H. And they're going to turn orange. And the best way that I can describe what it's doing is it's putting interface in these pattern pieces. So now that they're interfaced, I'm going to go ahead and press space to simulate, and they are now obeying my fold lines. And look at that, how nice. Oh my goodness. What a beautiful vest. Okay, y'all, if you haven't by this point, I'm going to encourage you to save your project file because you've done all this beautiful work. We're just going to go to File and Save Project, and you can also get there by the hotkey Controller Command S, and Vest Demo, I guess 3. This is the third time I've done this, so let's go ahead and save. And it might take a little while, but now you've got a really good checkpoint to work off of. I'm kind of a serial saver, which is both a curse and a blessing for me. All right, so now we've got a vest. What do we need to do now? I think it needs some buttons. So we're going to use some new tools. The button tool, which is actually over in the 3D window. It just looks like a button. There is no hotkey. You just have to press it. So press left click the button tool. And then let's look at our pattern. Oh, look, it's showing us where all the buttons go. So we'll put a button here. We'll put a button here. We'll put a button here. And then we want to put our buttonholes over here. So to get to our buttonholes, we're going to actually click the button icon, hold it down, and then this window will pop up, and then we can click buttonhole. So we're going to do the same. I'm actually going to click on that center there because that's going to be where I want my button to end up. So let's put one there and one there. All right, so we have the buttons on this side, which is fun, but we need them on the opposite side of the pattern. And to do that, we're going to go to the Select Move button tool. Again, there's no hotkey, you just have to go over here and click it. And I'm just going to click my first button. I'm going to hold Shift to click all of my buttons and all of my buttonholes. And once they're all clicked, they're all yellow. I'm going to right click any one of them, and I'm going to go Duplicate to Symmetric Pattern. All right, now they're there too. How cute. And now we just get to fasten them. So we're going to do the Fasten button tool, which is this icon over here that looks like a button sneaking away with a lock behind it. And to fasten our buttons, let's see, because of the overlap, I'm going to want to fasten this button to this buttonhole, and then the other ones just kind of exist in space behind it. Let's go ahead and click that button with our left, and then this little arrow is going to appear, and I'm just going to tell it which buttonhole to go to. So I'll click this buttonhole. I'll click this button and this buttonhole, and this button and this buttonhole. And now, when I simulate, they're just going to button themselves. Ah, and they did such a nice job. This doesn't always look so nice. Sometimes they really spaz out. So when that happens, what I do is I stop my simulation with my space bar, and then I go back to the Select Move button. In the 3D window, I do Control or Command A. I right click any of them, and I click Reset 3D Position. And that usually fixes any of the collision that's happening that makes it all kind of spaz out. All right, next our vest needs pockets. So we can see the outlines of the pockets that our diagram is giving us. Let's go ahead and use our internal polygon tool, that's the G hotkey, and this icon right up here, internal polygon slash line. And we're going to go ahead and just use 4 points to trace the outline of these pockets. And this way we can just kind of see their placement, and we can adjust that while we're here. And there's no curves in these, so no need to pull out the curve tool. And they're gonna show up on both sides of my vest. And we can leave it like this, and you know, you can just draft your pockets later. But if you want to draft them right now, we'll just go ahead and go to the polygon tool, which is H hotkey right up here. And we're just going to trace right over them, and the little points will want to lock into place. So it's actually pretty easy, and then they just kind of pop up in space. We'll want to use our transform pattern tool to duplicate both of these. So actually I'm going to use shift and click both of them, and then control or command D to duplicate and put them over here. Now let's just sew the 3 sides. I'm going to use the M tool again for the free sewing, because then I can go ahead and sew 3 sides at once. And as long as my sides are corresponding, I should have no issues with sewing on them, with sewing my little welts on backwards. All right, let's do that. And then because I duplicated with symmetric sewing, sewed both of them at the same time. Now I just want to go back to my transform pattern tool, or the A hotkey. I'm holding down shift. I'm clicking all 4 of my little welts, right clicking, superimpose over. So now instead of superimposing them along the side, they're going to show up on top of my vest. And this is doing a couple things. One, it's putting them into place, but also it's setting these welts to have a special property, which if we look at our property editor, it doesn't say that it's doing this, but it's actually shifting the layer to layer 1. So now whatever happens, the Clo3D knows that these welts need to be on top of the vest, not on the inside. So let me go ahead and press space to simulate, and I'll show you what you mean. So right now, because they're at layer 1, they're hanging out on top of the vest. If I stop my simulation and I move them to layer -1 in the property editor, what's going to happen? They're just going to go to, they look like they disappeared, but they went to the inside of the vest. See if I can pull it away. Yep, see, there they are. So if you're having trouble with your layers not behaving the way that you want them to, you just have to ask the computer nicely and it'll help you out. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my simulation. I'm going to put it back to layer 1. Okay. And then simulate. Oh shoot. This is I had the wrong pattern selected. Okay, we all make mistakes. I'm just going to do Control or Command Z, undo. Okay, now I'm going to click my welts again. And now I'm going to go to layer 1. And then that's going to, I don't know what he's doing. Oop. Oh, I didn't switch him back. Yes, layer 0. Sorry. Okay, now you're fine. You're in front. We're all happy. And y'all, this stuff just happens. And the more you work with the program, the more you can kind of predict when things go wrong, what we can do to fix them. All right, our vest is looking pretty good. Now we can have some fun with it. We can do some editing, but first I want to see kind of what this is going to look like in the fabric that I'm going to make out of it. So we can go to our object browser and click fabric 1. Yours might also say default fabric. And in our property editor, we're getting a ton of options, but we're going to ignore all of them and scroll to the very bottom where it says preset custom. We're going to click on this drop-down window, and there are several preset fabrics that we can choose from. Now, these won't necessarily look like all of these fabrics, but they're going to act like all of them once we click on them. So you can have a lot of fun playing around with these, but right now I'm just going to go to this wool option. And now when I simulate, we're going to see how that affects my fabric. All right, it has a little bit more structure, so it kind of is um, giving more of the shape of his, it's holding more of the shape of the pattern more like the wool would. The default pattern is, I have no idea. I think it's kind of like muslin, but it's this kind of in between vague fabric. So until we assign it the properties of a fabric that we want, um, then it's hard to see what exactly the fit is going to look like. Speaking of fit, let's look at that right now. So while we were working, the default avatar was fine because this is just some default size. We weren't really looking at fit at this up until this point. But now we can take the opportunity to input our avatar or our actor measurements into our avatar. So we're going to do that by going to the File menu, clicking Avatar, and going to Avatar Editor. Now you can pull up your measurement sheet for your performer, and right now I'm not sure why it says millimeter, but I'll switch that to inch to make that easier for me. And you can go ahead and plug in your performer's measurements. There are a few different options here that have different sets of measurements. I've experimented with these, and I actually like to keep it on basic the most because I find that any of the additional measurements that the human body adds are pretty nuanced and things that I can address in the second fitting anyway. All right. So I'm going to keep this on basic. Let's see. Let's just give him a 44-inch chest. So, oh my goodness. I have it simulated right now, so it just like basically popped his little vest open. All right. So once you're happy with how you've played around with these these measurements, go ahead and exit out of the avatar editor, and we're going to need to make some adjustments here because this guy is he's not fitting well into here. And what the computer's doing is it's actually stretching this fabric way more than the fabric wants to be stretched. And it's making that happen because it doesn't know what else to do. But we need to know how much that Clo3D is stretching this fabric in order for us to know how well this is fitting. So to do that, we're going to go to this little garment fit map icon and just hover over it. And we're going to go to the one that says Fit Map. You can also get here by the hotkey Alt 8. All right, and now it's showing us up here. It says can't wear is red. There's 6 spots where he cannot wear this vest. And then tight is yellow. We really don't want either, especially considering that this is going to be worn over a shirt and we want some wearing ease. So at this point, we'll go ahead and get our our edit pattern tool, or a Z hotkey, and this is where all of your years of patterning knowledge are going to come into play, because you're going to know, all right, if it's tight here, where do I need to let it out? Or if it's tight here, where do I need to let it out? I'm just going to lower this. I'm going to start actually by moving over my side seams. So anything that I edit to one side of the pattern, the other side of the pattern is going to be edited. I'm going to just click, and I'm going to use my arrow keys to just move it over. Like it moves over, I think, a 1/4 inch every time we move it over. We'll do that 2 times there, and I'll move this one over 2 times as well. All right, and now I'm going to press space to simulate again, and yeah, that gave him a little bit more room. I think I'm going to give him, I'm going to adjust this curve here because I think it's giving him a little more shape than he needs. And I might just click this point, and I'm going to use my arrow keys and move it over. You can also click and drag these points, but I like to move them all on one axis to have a little bit more control. But yeah, you can keep playing with this until it looks like what you need it to look like and fits the way you want. Let's adjust these arm size. I'm just going to go ahead and select both of these points by clicking and dragging. I'm going to click down on oh, I didn't. Let's click and then click. And then I'm holding down Shift. And when I hold down Shift, it wants to move it kind of on one axis. Let's just move these both down. All right, there we go. And I'm gonna, while all of these buttons are pressed, I have shift held, I have my left mouse button held. Now, while all those buttons are held, I'm gonna click my right mouse button. And this window will pop up that will ask me, okay, like how much do you actually want to move this? And I'm like, well, that looks like at least an inch, if not an inch and a half. We'll start with an inch. And I actually don't want it to be moved on the x-axis at all. So let's move it 1 inch total on the y-axis and press OK. And yeah, that gave him quite a bit more room there. I'm pressing simulate. I probably want to adjust these arm's eye curves too, because look how tight it is around his arm. He poor thing. So I'm going to go to, actually I'm going to stay in my Z, my edit pattern tool. And while I'm working on this, you know, just like good pattern etiquette, I'm looking at making this a right angle here because I don't want there to be a weird point in the arm's eye. So, you know, this program is just a tool. You still have to know all of your patterning techniques to make beautiful patterns in this program. All right. This will bug me if I don't move this down again. Okay, let's move it down another. Let's see, 0.75 and 0. And all right, let's see what that looks like. Okay, you're looking a lot better. I'm not seeing any strain anywhere. I might move over center back just a little bit, but I'm not going to worry too much about it in this tutorial. And at this point, you're also once you've kind of got your adjustments made for fit, you want to make sure that your pattern is true as well. So for example, in this collar over here, I noticed that that my seams didn't quite match up. And you can easily check that by going to the Edit Sewing tool, or B, and if you just hover over, it'll show you how the difference between the two seams. This one has a 0 difference because they're both 5.646 inches. This one, however, is like like almost a ½ inch difference. So we're gonna want to fix that. That side is 3 and then this side's 2. All right, so if I move this center back seam over by like maybe 0.4 inches, it might actually true that up really nicely. So let's give that a try. Again, I just left clicked, I held down shift to move it on one axis, and then while all those buttons were held, I right clicked. Let's do 0.4 and see what happens. It's going to automatically adjust that seam, and yeah, that's a lot closer. So when I simulate, oh yeah, that lays a lot nicer. There was a little bit of stress in there that kind of eliminated. My buttons are going a little wonky, but I can always fix that by going to my edit button tool, selecting all, right click, reset 3D position. There we go. All right, once you're happy with the fit and you've trued up your seams, you've checked all of your seams, so do all of your other seams, and they all are going to go together nicely. Let's go ahead and add some seam allowances to these patterns. So I'm going to do that by going to this little icon over here. It says seam allowance. Again, there's no hotkey. And once I click on it, I'm just going to click and drag over all of my patterns. And in my property editor, well, at first it automatically added this seam allowance, which is 0.394 inches, which is a funny seam allowance. I'm going to go ahead and add 0.5 inches to all of my seams. And you can edit them all individually by just clicking on a seam and saying, oh, okay, I want that one to be 1 inch. Oh, let's see. I don't know if it fixed all of it. Let's do 0.5. And all right. So yeah, you can edit them all individually. Like if you want hem allowance here, let's do 1 inch there. Or if you just don't want to add seam allowance to your patterns at all, because you want to do that on the fabric itself, that's fine too, but I just wanted to show this cool tool really quick. Another tool in Clothity that I find very helpful when making garments in real life is the pattern layout interface. So that's actually kind of a whole new window that we haven't talked about much before. But all you do to get there is go up to where it says simulation at the top left and click there, and there's all these different types of interfaces that you can go to, but we're going to just go to print layout. And here is super cool because it'll tell you how much fabric you need to make this vest. And of course, if you assigned different fabrics to different parts of the vest, then you could look at each one of those. Right now it's showing me on a 44-inch wide fabric, but if I want to adjust that, if I have this, I don't know, fabulous polyester that I want to cut this out of, then I can just go to in the property editor after I click on my fabric, change the width of it, and it'll adjust it here. And then all I do is click this little play button, and it's thinking, and it shows me how much yardage I need here. So for a 60-inch wide fabric, I'm only going to need 0.71 yards. And that's a kind of a nice reason to add the seam allowances because it'll calculate it with the seam allowances. And then, of course, you're going to end up buying 3 yards anyway because you always love to have extra. All right, from there, we're going to go back to simulation. I just wanted to show you that really quick. And all we have to do now is export our digital file, our digital pattern to a PDF. So to do that, all we do is go up to our File menu and export Adobe PDF. We're going to save it vest pattern, and I leave all of these checked because I usually do a lot of editing in Illustrator to prepare for print or to prepare for projecting with a projector. And that's it. Just click OK, and now your pattern is saved on your desktop. And that's pretty much the workflow for Clo3D working from an extant pattern diagram. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. If you have any questions about any of these workflows at all, please ask in the comments and I'm happy to address them. Thank you.